Welcome to an unfiltered look at media supply chain transformation. We have a great panel of experts today for you. From SDVI, we have Simon Eldridge and Jeff Stegman. And from Cinnafilm, we have Lance Moore and Dom Jackson. So just to get us started, the media supply chain is something that's near and dear to my heart, having been part of different transformations over the years, and certainly part of the Movie Lab's 2030 vision, or what is really known as the evolution of media creation, but it's more affectionately known as the shortened version as the 2030 vision. And actually, I just wanted to dive right in since since we're limited on time. And my first question actually is to the panelists: 2030 vision, good thing, bad thing? Even though I was an original author on that, please, this is unfiltered. You can tell me what you think. Was it too aggressive, not aggressive enough? Is it good for the industry, bad for the industry? What do you think about the 2030 vision and the evolution of media creation that was put out and is still being worked on by the movie labs? And that could be for anyone or all of you.
Who wants to jump in? I'll jump
Come
in
on,
first.
somebody's got to go first.
I'll jump in. I think it's terrific. I think that that's a broad statement, of course, but what I like about it is it gives us a little breathing room. 2030 is a little bit kind of far out there. So when we start thinking about the fact that we're trying to get all of these operations and apps and things to connect nicely and play nicely in the cloud, there's a little bit of relief that everyone's sort of agreed that it's 2030. On the flip side, we actually have to start getting to work now. So I appreciate the title, because the title says just get there. I mean, that's sort of what it's telling me. But I think in terms of the vision of connectivity and technology running close to the data and where it's stored, I think that's super critical. So I appreciate that you guys have put that together and have put so much energy into it. That's my
Great.
2 cents.
Anyone else?
One thing I would add is 2030 is a long way away. And a lot of those things are possible now. So I don't think we should be waiting until 2030 for that to be the norm. We can get there faster.
Well, it was about a path to 2030, right? Because there are some very challenging concepts, and we knew that there were a lot of technologies that needed to be developed and to give the industry time to develop, adapt, and adopt before that point, right? So it wasn't about, hey, let's wait till 2030 and then boom, here it is. It was that progression of understanding that, yeah, there's things you could do today, but there's this mindset that, well, but we're not going to have everything that we need in order to fully embrace the whole vision of really what it was about interconnectivity and cross-platform and multi-cloud and all those different concepts that are there, as well as real time and where we thought machine learning and AI would go. Obviously, it's a bit of a stab in the dark 4 years ago on where we'll be even 5-10 years in the future. But it was sort of that North Star. But to your point, Simon, I agree. That's why we actually need to be building along the way.
Yeah, iteration is good, I think. To do what you can and improve on it over time.
We might also add that historically we're in an industry that's been very reliant on very technical standards. As we move to software and agile processes, the technical standards, while important, lose some of their utility. But I think this idea of the vision and beginning to try and standardize the way we work is a super important evolution of that process, because we still need interoperability. We still need to be working in the same way, but now it's not about plugging cables anymore. It's at a completely different level. And I think the 2030 vision really gives a good template for how we start to do that.
Great. And I mean, besides it was far out there, you know, the idea of putting a date, you know, was really more about getting past near-term thinking, which sometimes can get in the way of what the bigger picture vision can be, right? What do we ultimately want? But if you're, you know, stuck in well, but I've got this problem to solve and this problem to solve today, it's harder to look at the bigger picture. And that's why we kind of stuck something out there that seemed far away, but it's obviously every year it's getting closer. So, you know, it feels like a little bit of that, you know, ticking clock from, you know, from Peter Pan. Like, you know, it's just kind of following us along. It's not so imminent at the moment, but it becomes imminent, you know, as we get closer. You feel that, and I think that having deadlines, I think, helps drive us in general, right? So Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to say something before I move on, but
no, I just to kind of build on what Simon alluded to in terms of iterating, I think, and we see this a lot, even when you think about broader supply chain transformation, it's important to have a vision, a big vision, but it's also important to start small and build from there. So have a big vision, but be able to start somewhere and then build on that and iterate it. And one of the things about the vision, the 2030 vision, is it is a vision, but it also is broken up into a set of different kind of modules. And you can tackle one of those modules and start there and then build off of that.
I will add also that having a big vision like this has been proven successful on some of the most complicated technical things that we've ever done as groups, right? Like you look at the space program. I mean, if we're going to actually put people on Mars by a certain year, then everything starts iterating and starts moving in that general direction, especially from a lot of the smaller technologists as well as the big ones. So I think so from my perspective, the reason I love it so much is because it kind of gives that big vision that we all can kind of point to and start working towards. And so when we go and start a conversation, sometimes it's about how do we get you on that road where everyone else is going as well, because you don't want to be left behind. And I hate to use FOMO. I mean, it's just sort of a natural thing, though, that if you want to be on this rocket ship and you want to get there by 2030, you really do have to start like right now, start working on stuff.
yeah, I think that that's certainly an important part of making sure that, you know, that it's not really so much about FOMO. It was geared towards trying to coalesce the industry into a direction that is mutually beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Which leads me right into, you know, some of the questions about, you know, where you've seen, you know, the media supply transformation occurring, some of the challenges, you know, that you've actually seen. You know, we've all heard apocryphal stories about, you know, these you know, cost overruns and really big problems that, you know, oh, they went and tried this and now they had to go back to an on-prem solution. You know, and it's always easy to point out the failures or you know, where things didn't necessarily work out the way that someone had anticipated. But I do want, because this is unfiltered, you know, some of the challenges you guys have seen, what do you see driving some of those particular problems? Because there are a lot of success stories that certainly don't get as big a headlines, you know, in many cases.
Right.
Anyone?
Yeah, I would say that the most common mistake that's taken by people who are early in their migration is trying to just do exactly what they do or have been doing on premise, but doing it in the cloud. So Lance, I mean, even if you think back to when we started partnering, you know, a lot of the tools were not cloud-friendly tools. They were on-premise tools being run in the cloud. And by just moving that technology up there doesn't give you any of the inherent advantages of automating manual tasks and scaling applications and having the tools available on demand that you need. So that tends to slow people down. It's a quick way to say, hey, look, I've done this thing, but if you don't get the benefits, then there's not really any point.
Right, right. You can't just, it's not just about checking the box that, yeah, okay, now we have some of our operations in the cloud, because a lot of these technologies have to be completely, on our side, have to be completely retooled to work differently in the cloud. And that takes work on our side too, because, we don't want to create a technology that's financially challenging both for the customer and for ourselves. And that's paramount to design.
Sure, sure. I was gonna say, I think that's sort of that, traditional sort of IT lift and shift sort of paradigm of we're just gonna take these processes and move it to the cloud and everything's gonna be faster, better, cheaper. But the reality is media is a completely different beast than most of the data, and the data processing that actually was moved to the cloud that worked for that sort of lift and shift paradigm. There's that whole the whole notion of media. When we looked at the transition from tape based to file based, we kind of went right from tapes and went to an analogous file based format, right? We had these monolithic media files that represented a tape, and that was fine as a first step because we had to do something. But it wasn't until you really got into component-based workflows and started to be able to take advantage of how do you break these things down to take advantage of microservices and other types of processing. And I need to do these sorts of analyses of the data, where it really starts to open up, I think, to what both Lance and Simon are talking about. Those are the opportunities, right? Is how do you start to deal with your media in a more intelligent way that allows you to hopefully find opportunities that you might not have otherwise had, or at least find efficiencies.
And that componentization of media is also happening in the tools as well, I think. On premise, you would have big monolithic applications that did everything that you need to do. And when you get to a cloud environment where those tools are available on a consumption basis, you can pick specific tools that perform specific functions and get the best of everything.
Yeah.
But you do need to chip your teeth and get in there and just start trying things. I mean, even if moving a legacy workflow as is into the cloud is the starting point, at least you're starting somewhere. I mean, people just have to start getting their feet wet and experimenting a little bit. I mean, that's paramount to all this, is having a budget and a patience set aside out of the gate for the migration process, because no technology works the same in two different environments. It doesn't matter if it's software or hardware.
I think that's important, though, to think about it and be willing to experiment. And one of the beauties of the cloud and that consumption model is it doesn't cost a lot to experiment. You don't have to put a big upfront investment in place to try something. You can turn something on, adjust your workflow, rethink what you're doing, try it, see how it works, and then evaluate, and then build from there. And to your point, Lance, it's important to get started, even if it's not exactly right, because it's easy to iterate, and you want to iterate from there.
Yeah.
And does that also lends to sort of the first steps aren't necessarily, hey, I've got to take my entire infrastructure and put it in the cloud. You could be in a hybrid situation. Again, once you get past we'll say the dabbling phase, right? Once you start to implement, there's a pathway, right? Is that something that you guys are seeing more customers take, or do they want to like a wholesale jump into, okay, let's figure out how quickly we can move?
I think it's quite analogous to your 2030 vision question. I think that the customers who have a vision of where they want to be really helps make progress, right? Because it's not necessarily saying, hey, here's my end goal vision and I'm going to just get there from day one, but it makes it much easier to pick a path or pick a use case to get started, and then work your way towards that end vision.
Yeah. And for us, we've had to iterate our own financial models, and we still do, because we're trying to adapt to all levels in the step process, right? So when the people are just getting started, you have to provide bite-sized access. to the powerful technology that eventually they'll build confidence upon, and further down the path, they'll be able to really go all in. So we're constantly reevaluating that. And because we're part of an ecosystem, we all have to get along and talk pretty regularly about how we serve up these bite-sized pieces, but still we got to get paid for that work because that's critical work. So there's always this balancing act. But I will say that what's a lot different now than, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. When did you guys start the 2030 vision? Was that about 5 years ago?
We actually, it was the end of 2019 was when we put it out, but we had been talking about it for a while, but we essentially said 2020 was really the launch.
So we've come a long way in 5 years. And I'm not saying that everything works flawlessly now, but the conversations have gotten so much easier when we're talking to partners or customers about conceptualizing paying for some bite-sized access to certain types of technology to get them into that experimental phase where they know the budget's not going to kill them while they're starting to do this. But ultimately, we still have to have visibility into, well, but where are you going with this? Because if you're going to a model where you're going to use our technology for 5 minutes a year, that I can't sustain on that, right? But if we're moving you to a model where you're going to 5,000 hours a year or something where there's a project and there's a need and you've defined these things. So sometimes as technologists, we're actually helping them define what that beginning trail looks like in the first couple steps of moving along this path.
That's great. Yeah, I'm in releasing the 2030 vision. The funny thing about that was, obviously we didn't envision the pandemic when we were putting this together. But how do you feel that the pandemic has maybe helped some of those conversations? Because I think it certainly helped us, within the studio and other areas of the industry where traditionally people were very anti-cloud or remote collaboration. There's just no way this stuff will work. And then it was, well, when you're forced to use a tool and forced that, that may be the only way you can get something done, all of a sudden, mindsets change. And when you see that, yeah, this may not be the optimal way to do it, but the fact that you can do it and you can start to look at how you, utilize your workforce, I think it's been a boon for the industry because and the 2030 vision more specifically, because it's helped spur more of that mindset that might have otherwise taken longer to actually get established. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
For sure, it was a forcing function, I think, in getting people to to have to try to do things remotely, do things accessing a shared resource. And this is where the cloud really came in handy in a way, because it made that content available to anyone, anywhere. I've actually heard a few people say that it basically caused them to implement in 2020 what they had planned to implement in 2025 or 2028. It really accelerated the implementation of a whole remote style of work, both on the production side, but also on the media operation side. Just all that work that has to get done still had to get done, but had to be done from a more remote and more separate sort of fashion. And in a way, it was a benefit to the industry because it forced people to try stuff, and that trying worked. It largely worked for a lot of different types of workflows in our industry.
Were you going to say something, Lance?
No, I agree.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the things about our industry is our industry is fantastic at what we do, but we get very entrenched. As much as we take advantage of innovation, we also get very entrenched in our workflows. And so moving people to a new workflow without some sort of forcing function, sometimes it has to come from internal. There has to be a reason. And media supply transformation is one of those things that the business can see that there's a potentially a benefit, but you have all these people that you need in order to move them along. You also have to do the change management with the people. in order to actually get these things implemented and moved along, you got to, you know, train your workforce because it's a different environment, it's different tools, different ways of dealing with this stuff. And we inherently get very comfortable as human beings. We get comfortable with what we're doing and don't necessarily want to change. You know, how have you guys dealt with the, I'll say the human, you know, change management side of that?
I think that's probably the most challenging part, to be honest. The technology is there, and I think people are inherently resistant to change, even if they can see that there's a benefit. And so sometimes, often having that vision from senior leadership to say, "Hey, this is where we're going, and this is why," creates the forcing function. And to Jeff's point, you know, the pandemic kind of created some of that forcing function because it was like that was the only way that they could actually operate at that point.
Yeah.
I think one of the side effects of that sort of rush to the cloud was lift and shift to some degree, because there was an urgency to be able to continue operating just for business continuity, and so I think that quite a lot of what has happened since then is re-engineering. Okay, well, we're in the cloud now, but now how do we make it more efficient? And how do we fine-tune our processes? And how do we automate more? And how do we have better choice of tools? So it's a journey really, rather than a destination, I think.
You asked earlier, Bill, about what the challenges were. I suspect that some of those challenges were caused by people moving too quickly because of the pandemic and COVID. And that if we hadn't had that, certainly things would not have happened as quickly, but people may not have misstepped quite as much on how they do it long term.
Yeah, that's always a challenge too, right? Is the moving too quick, maybe over exuberance or irrational exuberance over oh, this is going to solve all the problems without really understanding how how to implement it or what the impacts are, you know, choice A versus choice B kind of thing. And so yeah, that I can see too as a missteps that then also create the negative reaction within people of, well, that didn't work, right? And they're not necessarily looking at why it didn't work at that time, as opposed to saying, well, maybe it would work in a different context.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, we can all adapt a culture of some mistakes are okay. I mean, we have to try things to learn them. And, you know, I feel sometimes I wish I had a mug that said, "I'm here to push you out of your comfort zone" in every meeting that I go into, because that's really my job, is to push people out of their comfort zone and say, let's look at a possibly better, efficient way to do things with new technology. And we've been doing this for, I mean, it will continue after I'm long gone. It's been going on for a long time. And it's okay to be pushed out of your comfort zone and take a look at these things and try them. And it's even easier if the relationships, like, you know, we've been doing this a while. We're friends now. We all know each other on this call. We enjoy sort of going after pushing people out of their comfort zones together. And so that trust, I mean, that's paramount to, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone with you. And because you've had some success over here, but they have to also realize you just might hit a brick wall in the first couple of times we try things, because I feel like it's a custom engineering situation in some regards, no matter where we go. And, you know, just because we have to adapt to what they've been doing before, they want to keep some of that. They don't necessarily want to move everything to the modern way of doing things anyway. So that's,
there's a very big mindset shift as well, right? Because if you spent your entire career defining and building on-prem systems, then the budgeting is very different, the support process is very different, the capacity planning is very different, and all of those things they need re-engineering, right? So, you know, you're not worrying about capacity anymore. You're not worrying about being locked into one particular tool anymore. You're not, you know, it really is a different mindset, as well as different technologies. I mean, this is cloud at this point. It isn't broadcast engineering, which is where most people have their background.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges, right? Is who are the experts within the company, and what are the expertise that they actually need, right? Those don't necessarily align, and so it's a challenge in order to make sure that there's an openness to understanding that these new media supply chain opportunities also need new skill set, right? And skilling up either existing staff or bringing in and augmenting staff to help that process is really critical as well, because yeah, it's easy to get set into entrenched thinking, or this, the cloud is so different, from an on-prem system, at least at first. But it's like anything else. People learn and they grow, and that is, hopefully they'll see that as an opportunity as well.
Sure. I think most people want to learn new skill sets as they go forward in their career. I mean, and it's not going to stop coming. I think we're going to have a chronic shortage of human capacity in this industry for a long time, no matter what technologies are coming down the pipe, AI, any of it. They're still going to take humans to make it work. So I don't think anyone at its root should be worried about their career potential in this space, as long as they're willing to learn new things. And that's really not any different in our market segment than any other.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, with all the technologies that are coming along, there's obviously, before we get to the AI topic, because that's obviously on everybody's minds, given the explosion last year with the guild negotiations and everything else. There was, I kind of see it as sort of a societal problem that is overshadowing sort of the AI for the industry, which is a little more, just a subset. And certainly, look, the labor implications are there, but to your point, Lance, I don't see human labor going away. I think it's just going to shift. And it's going to be something that we learn to adapt and use these tools. How do you see AI really coming into the media supply chain? There's two aspects of that, because there's AI processes, and then there's the generative AI sort of creation piece. How do you see that affecting the media supply chains for your customers? Or in general?
Well, so from what we've seen is the use of AI-based tools, or maybe better stated, machine learning tools within the supply chain is already being done, and it's already having fairly big impact on media operations and the media supply chain. So things like even an automated QC process is in some ways a machine learning kind of type of function. And one of the things that we've observed is, in every supply chain, there's a mix of tasks and jobs that a machine can do, and then there's tasks and jobs that still require a human involvement or manual intervention. And it's really that intersection that's kind of interesting, and it's also part of the whole change management process, because now instead you have a QC operator who is used to doing reviewing entire pieces of content. And then as you move to some of these new tools, now the tool is doing the first review and marking or identifying points of interest that require a human, and the human now only has to go to those points of interest. So they become a lot more productive, but they have to change the way they work a little bit. And as the tools have gotten better, your trust level that they're finding the right points of interest has gotten better. And all of that is leading to a lot more efficiency in the process, but it's really based on that intersection of the output of the machine learning, and it becomes an input to the manual work.
Totally. And that's why, the continuation of human involvement and human labor, I don't see going away anytime soon, because these tools are really being designed to enhance our capabilities, right? Let the machines do the things that they do. And this is no different than any other innovation that we've been doing within our industry, right? The machine learning stuff, which the AI is the sexy term, and I get that from a marketing speak, but most of it's, machine learning, advanced machine learning. And we've been doing that for years, to your point, Jeff. And I think that, that will only continue because those are the things that, humans aren't necessarily good at, right? It takes us a lot of time and effort but if we focus human capabilities on the things that we do really well, we stand a better chance of being able to actually, really implement effective change for the business.
One of the things I would say about this, for the past 400 years, every time we've automated something, people have been up in arms about what everyone's going to do with their time. And we're not all working 5 hours a week because we've automated all the work away, right? Everybody's working more, not less. And I don't see AI or ML fundamentally being any different. We'll automate a bunch of stuff that people do, and we'll find other stuff for those people to do, because that's how it's been going on for a long time.
I mean, ultimately, it's about quality of life, right? And AI tools are no different from any other process automation. It's, do you want people sitting there clicking buttons because they need to say, please execute the next task? Or do you want those kind of decisions to be automated and let those people focus on higher value tasks and actually get more work done, because that's what everybody's trying to do, is process more content and deliver more content.
Yeah. And it's going to take some experimentation. I can always come back to that. I mean, this is yet another powerful layer of efficiency and automation that we need to start working on, and we need to start experimenting with and get to know people. And there's going to be new companies that come out of nowhere that can suddenly do some magical thing, but we've got to vet that and make sure that it actually works. And we also need to understand its implications. We need to understand its moral implications, all these things, but there's no doubt it's here, and it's just time to start pecking away at it and getting to know it better and experimenting with it. And, but at the end of the day, human hopefully gets to say what a human gets to look at, because it's all about storytelling and it's all about conveying ideas to one another. And that's why I don't think the humans are going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely. Hopefully. I think too, given the explosion of Sora recently, obviously that kind of blew a lot of people's minds, and the huge improvement in being able to generate photorealistic video certainly was I think a watershed moment for a lot of people who didn't think this was possible, even though today I don't, we're still at the early stages, and obviously there's a lot of demos that are interesting, but I don't know that they necessarily are fully fleshed out tools that are going to be able to tell a story the way that it needs to be told. And there's a short, an Airhead short that was made that's very compelling, but you can see too that it's not necessarily within the control of even of the humans that are doing this to get exactly a consistent look across shots, even though it's very compelling. So there's always going to be humans. I mean, and again, these are stories that are being told by humans using these as tools, right? I don't think that a new tool being introduced is necessarily a bad thing if it's helping people to actually tell their stories. I use the analogy of like, I can't draw to save my life. You'd be probably hard pressed to understand my stick figure drawings. Flow chart I could probably do, but I can now convey, a thought by going through and using these tools to generate ideas that now meet my needs, because I'm able to prompt it and say something that, gives me what I want. And it takes a long time, and you got to go down sort of a rabbit hole of trial and error trying to get it. But if I can get something at the end of the day that shows you something that is my vision, then that's an incredibly powerful tool for people to have in their hands, because we are inherently visual beings, right? And we can write all we want, and we can put on paper, but we still in our minds turn those into some sort of a picture, and it's not the same picture, right? So I think that there's the human involvement, the human element of this, and again, people I think, want to continue to be told stories by humans. Not necessarily, AI is not going to tell you the story and make up the story and do that anytime soon. But you know, I won't put it out of the realm of possibility way into the future. But I don't know that I want to be a part of that.
Yeah. I do think it's important to differentiate the difference between utility AI and generative AI, at least for the time being, because the utility AI seems to me that it's the constant button pushing and the things that we can take the work off of someone's plate. And then generative AI on the creative side is a dangerous area. It just is to play. But you know, we need to understand it and learn it. But utility AI, I've seen some fantastic things come out just in the last 6 months, and it's going to take a little time to weave that in and start really flexing it. But the reason I raised that important differential is because, you know, we've been working with customers for a long time. There's that trust I talked about earlier. So for me, I want to be able to present some of these new things that other people are doing magnificently as utility or generative. So right out of the gate, their guard is going to either come down to a certain point and they might be willing to start stepping into this and experimenting, or if their guard's up, that's okay. We could still talk about it because there's definitely going to be a place for the generative on the manufacturing side as well.
One other aspect.
That's a great point. Go ahead.
Yeah, one other aspect that customers have been telling us is generative AI around content is different to generative AI around other tasks. So using Gen AI to perform metadata transformations or synopsis translations, like those kinds of tasks are clearly safer ground than using Gen AI to generate content or pure intellectual property as part of your core product.
Yeah.
These are great points. I think that's where, again, the not to say that they're not smart, intelligent, you know, machine learning processes, but I think that those, we'll call them more like background tasks, you know, the things that you can start to slice and dice your library in ways that we just hadn't envisioned, that people don't really think of when it comes to the content, you know, how you might be able to remonetize or monetize or remonetize a content library using these tools. We just don't know how we'll do that yet, but we know that the tools are being developed to give you the control to do that. And that's actually, you know, an empowering, you know, place to be. And one of the reasons to be able to go in and, you know, take the leap into your, you know, digital media supply chain transformation is because these tools are coming, and we need to be prepared for being able to be nimble and you know, adapt to these adapt and adopt these tools, you know, as they come along, so that we can be you know, better for your business to be able to serve content to, you know, wherever you feel is most appropriate to your customers.
Bill, it might be helpful if the Movie Labs 2030 folks started also, not saying they're not, by the way, but started looking at help in terminology with regards to AI, so we can all kind of start using some of the same nomenclature, so that, you know, like I said, those conversations can range between, we're just getting started, we want low risk, we're more creative, we're more experimental. And so it's just food for thought, some feedback for your group, because
I'm no longer part of Movie Labs because that's a studio venture, but I couldn't agree more. I think part of what we're starting to do, I co-chair the Science Technology Council at the Motion Picture Academy. I'm also part of the Science and Technology peer group with the Television Academy. Both groups have put on Gen AI summits to help educate their members, as well as other industry events going on to talk about generative AI, and we'll continue that conversation, because I think education is, to your point, is Lance, is really key and fundamental. Besides getting sort of a common nomenclature, that would be great, but but we might be a little ways away from that one. But at least having an understanding of what these tools are, what their potential is, and where they really affect things is you know, going to be I think a really important part of this.
Agreed.
one last topic, we have just a couple minutes left before we have a lot of questions, so that's good. I'll try to filter through those as we wrap up. But sustainability is another topic, another big topic in our business, and certainly part of the whole transformation process of any media supply chain. How do you guys feel about sustainability, and where are your customers feeling that sustainability is an important part of the calculus in making this change?
I'll start on that one. For us, it's been a big topic and something we've pushed really hard to embed in the way our product works and the way we're able to run supply chains effectively at net zero. And we're starting to see it in RFPs that are coming in from customers. There's a component now of the decision-making process is really built around sustainability, and we're seeing that in deals that are coming through. A couple of thoughts around how we're achieving better sustainability, and a big part of it is this move to the cloud for two reasons. One, when you're renting equipment and you're using truly cloud native kind of applications, you're spinning up resources when you need them and you're spinning them down. So you're not having idle equipment sort of running in your facility. And so just almost by definition, you're becoming you're more efficient about the power you're using, because you're only using it when you need it and you're not using it when you don't. And it's directly matched to the workload that you're running. On top of that, the cloud providers are doing a great job of using renewable energy to power their data centers. I mean, we see, even take AWS, the amount of power we use one year to the next year goes down dramatically, partly because we're getting more efficient, but also because they're just using more renewable energy to power their data centers. And so the carbon footprint of running your workloads in the cloud continues to go down because of the efforts of the cloud providers to use that renewable energy.
Great. Anyone else?
I'll jump in again. I really think it boils down to use what you need. I mean, I think that's a fundamental mind shift we all as human beings need to take in general, whether it's only eat what you need to eat, only use what you need to use. And what I love about this new media supply chain, that's the philosophy. It's like, use what you need to use. The tricky part is for us to make it
I need it all, Lance, but I need it all.
Well, of course you do.
No, go ahead, Lance. Sorry.
Oh no, that's it. Like, use what you need and know what it costs. And that's almost the Movie Labs 2030 vision for me. I mean, that's what it's all about, because it makes me feel good to know that I'm going in there. Now, truth be told, I can't honestly say hand on heart, I know that these new workflows are more green than what you used to do. There's a lot of, it would be great if there was some paid science behind all of this to really tally it all up. How much gas are we saving by working from home? How much, all these things do add up, the invisible savings. So that would be helpful. But philosophically, I think that's one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning, is knowing that I'm part of helping companies move into a use what you need workflow. Good, Jeff.
Yeah, no, to kind of go back to Simon's earlier point around, being able to not have to build for that peak load. When you're in the old world, the sort of on-premise model, you're building for peak and you're running for peak all the time, even if you're not actually, you need that. And when you get now in this cloud model, in this sort of use what you need model that you just said, you're not designing for peak, because the peak, you don't really care about it. You don't care about the peaks, because the resources will be there when you need them, and you're only going to turn them on and use them when you need them.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
There is one other inherent benefit of cloud, and that is that if you build a data center, you build it on a certain technology platform, and you keep it for however long you need to depreciate it for. Whereas in the cloud, you can move to generations of technology which have better power, environmental footprint, efficiency metrics whenever they become available. So one of the things that we do at the end of each year is we run some statistics on, you know, what did we do and how many jobs and how many hours of content and all that kind of stuff. And one of the really interesting things is that our processing was 25% up over last year, and our CO2 footprint was 2% down over last year. So, I mean, that's a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think there are companies that are working towards trying to, you know, figure out how to put sustainability in the context that you were talking about, Lance, right? Is give more of an idea of footprint and how is this really affecting things overall, but it is a challenge.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Dom?
I think the others have covered it well. I mean, I think it's very hard for an individual company to meet or to achieve the kind of sustainability levels and green energy usage and so on that the hyperscalers can. And I think that's probably not budgeted into anyone's cost calculations of moving to cloud. If you budgeted in the cost of putting in an entirely renewable energy system into your existing data center, that would shift the economics massively. Whereas if you're going to the hyperscalers, you're getting that essentially not free, but baked into the cost already.
Right. No, it's a good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at time, and I appreciate all of your thoughts there. We have a bunch of questions to get to. I don't think we're going to get to all of them because there's way too many, but a lot of good comments too, a lot of positive comments and reinforcing what you guys are saying. Here's one. What suggestions do you have for those that have limited technical resources, specifically how to engage, third-party assistance, et cetera? Are you guys, I'm assuming you guys work with your customers to try to figure this out, but you know, more, I think that goes back to more of the ecosystem of expertise to help companies, you know, go on this journey. You want to take that, Lance?
Sure. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we have had to evolve a bite-size entry kit. We just have to, because in order for people to experiment on a budget and squeeze it into their busy schedule, they need quick access to tools. And we're not the only ones. A lot of the technology vendors have evolved these things. So I think, coming back to another point that I made earlier, which was in the 5 years since, you know, the 2030 Labs document, I've just seen it's been almost 180 with regards to the technology vendors in general being very amenable and trying really hard to create an on-ramp for people to experiment. So I think that getting out there and talking to the tech vendors that check the pain points that you know that you're already dealing with on a regular basis, whatever it is, transcode, whatever, you go find the companies, you go to the NAB, you go to the trade shows, and you talk to those vendors and you ask them, how can I on-ramp? How can I get into this affordably so I can experiment? And I think that you'll find that 80 to 90% will know exactly how to respond to that question.
There was a comment in the chat by someone who has been through this transition. So I think it's interesting, but it was just do something. And I think a lot of customers are scared to take that first step, but that's how you learn, is you do the experimentation.
Yeah.
Well, that's
jump in, the water is warm. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, that leads to another question. Watcher says, I recently had a conversation with a senior exec of a reputable post shop about cloud. He was adamant that he would never go to the cloud because he was compared the cost of the on-prem storage and small IT team of engineers to maintain the infrastructure as opposed to the, you know, cost benefits of moving to the cloud. How do we get him on board? How do we, and you know, get him to be more open to the cloud, or can they continue to exist without the cloud, you know, or for some period of time? How do you guys feel about that?
One of the things that we hear repeatedly from customers is that when they're trying to build a business case to migrate to the cloud, the focus is on efficiency. right? It's like, how can we do more with the same amount of resource, or how can we trim the cost of the processes that we have? That is possible to do, but once the migrations have happened, I think the biggest benefit that customers see isn't necessarily efficiency, it's agility. You know, the ability to quickly pivot from one thing to another, or the ability to accept a content deal because they're not infrastructure or resource limited anymore. So I think that's a very hard thing to build a business case around, but it's an incredibly valuable thing if you want your business to be flexible and agile and succeed.
Well said.
Great. Another question. For some processes, human eyes still need to actually look at the image content natively, uncompressed at full res, i.e. not a proxy. Are there solutions to make this possible seamlessly? For example, can you download to view locally without breaking the content security rules of inherent to 2030? I will start to, but my take would be I would start to push on the notion of what it means to QC an uncompressed file and what that really means, because you know there are instances, and I'm not saying that every instance is the same, but if you're in a cloud-based instance, you probably could use a very high quality proxy that's more akin to streaming that would represent what it is that you're QCing for. But again, that, you know, you guys might have a differing opinion. You know, I know that I'm a little controversial in using high quality, you know, JPEG 2000 compression for being able to do these types of things where you're not losing the details that are important. But how does anyone else want to take?
I think interestingly, there's an AI answer to that question as well. In that, you know, humans can't concentrate looking in detail at images for hours at a time. So probably one of the ways that we'll deal with that problem is have the AI point out areas that need a human to look at them, and then they're just going to pull, maybe that just pull frames down locally, uncompressed frames to look at, or maybe, you know, some high res encoded version or whatever. But I think ultimately the days of a human being carefully eyeballing every single frame are somewhat numbered, just because it won't ultimately work as well, because people get bored and tired and distracted and so on.
Sure. I remember the days when we were QCing, you know, 4K theatrical releases, but we only had, you know, HD monitors. So they were, you know, viewing it in quadrants. You had to do 4 passes and not looking at the whole image as a whole. And that's a lot for humans to take in and easy for them to miss. And that's why it takes multiple passes. And, you know, there, to your point, Dom, I think you're absolutely right that AI or some kind of machine learning process to identify the potential problem areas and let the humans make a decision on whether it should be there or not is I think the right way to go about it in the long run.
I'd like to add also, you can look at other high-grade manufacturing processes as examples of what other industries do, and they can use statistical subsamples, random subsamples of an entire sequence of frames, pull a statistical number down. You can check those for general health. You can watch a high-res proxy, and then when, you know, like to Don's point, when the AI comes along, they may be able to clue you in on what additional frames to pull down or where else to look. I do definitely think that there are ways to do it, and you know, like no spacecraft electronics company has the time to evaluate every single capacitor that comes in the door. They have to look at some random statistical subsample that tells them now there's a 99% chance that if these are good, the rest of them are good. So there's some really good studies that are out there on that stuff. On that, I've never actually done it, so that's all I can provide. But it's just
I think that that's an interesting take too, because the problem I can see just for the industry is, you know, we have this notion of absolute certainty And even though we know we're not 100% perfect in that, but that is perfection is really what we go for at the highest level, right? And so when you say, well, we've done a statistical model and we're 99% confident that this is good, somebody's going to say, well, I don't know that that's good enough for me, on this large theatrical release or this big thing we're releasing to streaming platform, whatever it might be. So I don't disagree with the notion. I think it's just that's not how our industry typically has approached these things, because and so I think that's another thing that could be weaved in as change. But I think the intermediate step is probably using tools to point humans, that kind of thing. At some point, we might get comfortable with statistical modeling for being able to say, "That is good, put it out in the theaters," but probably not too soon.
I think there's an opportunity here as well to assign or align efforts and therefore your costs with the value of the product that you're working on, right? I mean,
Sure,
if you're working on a cinematic release and it's a premiere, then the amount that you should spend and the amount of effort that you should put into that is very different to launching 30-year-old archive content and onto a D2C platform.
Yep.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Appropriate use of technology in the cost model.
Yep.
Another question: Where do you find resources to help clients manage this change? And are there places to go to? What skill sets do they fail to engage in, or do they? Is there a way for them to actually go and skill up essentially? That was a hard one, I guess.
I think that the thing that we've seen make the biggest difference is a customer community. Customers want to talk to other customers who've been on this journey and learn from their, wins and losses, right? And so they can not make the same mistakes as other people who moved early. I think that's probably the biggest resource.
Great. And is there a concern that adoption of utility or generative AI is going to make it more challenging to meet those sustainability demands? It's good. That's actually a good question, because obviously even the inference use of AI, obviously the massive amount of energy required to actually train one of these models, but even the inference side can use quite a bit of energy. How do you see that sort of mixing in, or is that because it's an over time sort of model where these things will get adopted, to the point that infrastructure costs or sustainability will increase while that cost curve comes down on AI? I don't know how you feel about that.
I'll jump in on that. Just really quick. We're going to be, so the big tech companies are growing. They're becoming bigger tech companies. They're investing heavily in chips, and they want us to use those chips. So a lot of what we've discussed is going to use that infrastructure. Okay, so that's good. So there's no lack of infrastructure. What I would be cautious of is they're going to tell us all the reasons to use that infrastructure, and a lot of their information will be 100% accurate. A lot of it will be marketing. That's just fact. So it would be nice to have an independent body start looking at the environmental impact of all of these things, as opposed to actually trusting everything that the big tech companies tell us, because it's a bit like the fox guy guarding the hen house. So, and I'm not saying that they're doing anything shifty, but this is unscripted and unfiltered. And I'm just saying that
Sure.
We really have to dive in on what it actually is doing to the environment and understand it fully. I'm as excited as anybody to get to use some more efficiencies, but if it's going to burn down one tree, I have to think twice about it. So we just got to figure out what's actually happening. Jeff, Simon, you guys have any thoughts?
The one thing that I would add, and this is just a practical example of one of the things that we saw our customers do. They were using AI to do like basically safe search across content, looking for violence, looking for nudity. And there's obviously an environmental cost of the GPUs and everything to run that process. But the end result was that operators could review a piece of content in under 10 minutes instead of it taking 2 hours. So there's a great offset there in terms of time and efficiency versus the cost of the hardware to actually run the job.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean that's an energy efficient use of that resource, let alone the human resource, but the technical resource. So I know we're up against time. That was probably the last question, but oh, sorry, was there another comment?
I was just going to say, I would also add, yeah, I mean, the cost of training and so on can be huge from an energy budget point of view, but I've also seen examples of people replacing conventional brute force compute with AI and ML algorithms and saving 95% of the power budget that they would have used otherwise to perform those processes. So that's both ways. It's a very complicated area.
Yeah. Complicated it is, yes. I think we're out of time. There were so many more questions. It was gratifying to see. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. We got to only a handful. But hopefully we can. I don't know if there's a way for us to be able to answer your questions offline or get to some of those. But really appreciate everybody joining us. Hopefully this was entertaining and engaging for you, and hopefully you guys will start diving in as everyone said, just dive in and start your media supply chain transformation, and get started on the future and taking advantage of all the things to come. So
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Great
for
to see
letting me do this.
It was a lot of fun.